All right, I guess I'll run with this. So welcome everybody to our happy hour. This is our opportunity to kind of discuss everything training, ISFSI related. This month, we are going to be discussing a really cool topic in an organization that's close to a lot of our hearts, and that's the Center for Public Safety Excellence. And we had the opportunity today to have Mike Higgins on with us. We're going to discuss everything from, personal credentialing, what your department's credentialing could look like, and then what the credentialing process does. I can speak for myself, but I've personally gone through the credentialing process, and I find it very rewarding just as a self-exploration type tool for myself to see where my strengths were, where my weaknesses were, and what opportunities existed for me in the fire service, and really made me, in my opinion, maybe no one else agree, but a more well-rounded officer. And then we'll talk about, we got Jesse Marcotte on, who kind of heads up our training officer credential, and talk about how the training officer credential kind of parlays into that chief training officer credential. And so we got Brad French, who's going to co-host here today and kind of take the lead on this thing with us as a CPSE expert from the field, if you will, some of this stuff. So we'll go through a process. We'll kind of have Mike talk about CPSE credentialing and accreditation, and then obviously we'll discuss some things, and then we'll open up for some questions at the end. If you guys have questions, obviously just post them over in the chat. As we see them, we'll work those in, and of course at the end we'll have some opportunity for questions as well. But Brad, did I miss anything?
No, not at all. I, however, will offer a friendly amendment, which is I am certainly no expert on CPSE stuff whatsoever. I am a fan. I'm certainly a fan of CPSE and this entire topic of how the CPSE credentials interact with instructors and training, and kind of what that crosswalk looks like, particularly as it relates to my only contribution to the pre-meeting for this yesterday was to suggest that we get Jesse Marcotte on to talk about how TOC really vibes into some of the technical competencies for CTO. So no, I'm joking, but I'm very excited about this topic. Yeah, there's so many good parallels and good pathways between some of the stuff that ISFSI is doing and some of the stuff CPSE is doing as far as credentialing, and some not. Some has nothing to do with instructor stuff whatsoever. So we'll get into all those different facets. So just happy to be here.
All right, fantastic. Well, like I said, with no further ado, we'll turn it over to Mike Higgins from CPSE. And Mike, I'll kind of let you take over. Thank you again for being here.
Definitely. I do appreciate it, and hopefully I will do it justice as y'all put it forward. So I'll share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. Good? Cool. All right, so I'm going to go through the credentialing process, give a little bit of a background of CPSE and what it's about and where we came from. I'll give a little introduction on myself. I was a deputy chief with the city of Columbus, Georgia, retired 3 years ago, worked there for close to 37 years. So been in the fire service for a really long time, and I obtained 3 credentials during my tenure with the department. I was with one department for 37 years. That's kind of different in where we're from. It's up north. It's a little bit different. You can move around a little bit. There's not much lateral movement around here. So stayed with the same organization for a really long time. And I actually retired for about 2 days, which was a weekend, and started working with CPSE right after that. So so we'll move forward on it, and that's enough about me. And so let's see, there we go. All right, so CPSE started back in 1986. The ICMA and the IFC came together and decided they wanted to come up with the Commission on Fire Accreditation International. That's what it started out as. And in 2000, the Commission on Chief Fire Officer designation was established. That's when the CFO designation actually came out. And then in 2006, the Commission on Fire Accreditation International and the Commission on Fire Chief Officer designation combined to create the Center for Public Safety Excellence. So under that umbrella is CFAI and CPC. So that's where we actually came from. So we're working on a couple more years. We'll be 40 years old, which is unimaginable to me. But a lot smarter people than I am came up with this idea. So CPSE is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We basically go through fire department accreditation, credentialing for fire and emergency services professionals, and education programs. I'll kind of give a little caveat later on just for the fire and emergency services professionals, because we do have a credential that is not specifically for the fire service. It is for the fire service, not specifically for that. So this past year, we went through a process of changing our vision statement. Of course, on the left was what our vision statement was. And when you read it, most people, you could probably put it with the World Health Organization, the WHO. So we changed it to the one on the right, which is to be a vision, so to be a catalyst for the advancement of fire and emergency services to create a safe and resilient communities. We didn't change our mission statement because the vision and mission kind of stayed the same. And of course, we have our core values. And just like your organization has too, you have the core values as well. So I sent Brian and Brad an email earlier today with some links in it, and hopefully they'll pop them in the chat. These links will be out there for everyone to use. Hopefully you'll bookmark them. This is our webpage, and it goes through the credentialing process. If you click on each one of those links, excuse me, it'll take you to that specific designation. And from there, you can actually click on that and go forward into the process of actually applying for each one of them. So sometimes we get the question on what's the difference between credentialing and certification. Well, credentialing, it's a third-party verification. You actually get a broad spectrum of individuals that look at your accomplishments, and then maintains continuous improvement because you have to renew every 3 years. Then I know you talked about the training officer credential through your organization, as well as meeting some continuous improvement processes as well. So on the certification side, you meet something and you pass it, so you get certified in it. It's an the individual's competence in that particular certification, but also that certification can be used in the designation process as well. So that's the difference between the two as you move forward. So designation is defined. We have 6 designations, and as you can see, each of them have their own different aspects of what they mean. CFO is the only, and I'll say it is the only designation that you have to be a chief or above. That's the only one. The chief medical officer, you have to be an EMT, paramedic, or in the EMS service for 10 years. You don't have to be a chief. The fire marshal, you just have to have oversight of the bureau or supervision to be eligible for the fire marshal designation. And the chief training officer one, we'll get into that a little bit more detail here in just a second, because this is an instructor-based organization. You just have to administer training wherever you're located. We have CTOs that are instructors at universities. We have CTOs who work for companies that do training. So you don't have to be a chief or the chief of training to be able to be part of that. The fire officer designation is another one that's kind of that people don't realize. You don't have to be the company officer to get the fire officer designation. You only have to ride up in the seat for 12 months. That can be done intermittently. And as long as you have documentation that shows that you've done that, you can be a firefighter and get the fire officer designation. The PIO is our newest one, which was put out in November of 2022. It's a pretty long description on who can apply. Basically, if you are the PIO or you are the backup PIO for your organization, then you can apply for the PIO designation. This is the first designation that we have that is not specifically for the fire service. So we have 36 or 37 PIOs designated right now, and at least half of them are not in the fire service. We have some from Department of Transportation, we have universities, we have the FBI, so different organizations like that. So if you have somebody in your organization that is the PIO and their job description says PIO, they're probably eligible for this designation. So you have to be active in a department to be able to put in, or have not been longer than 12 months since you retired. So if it's within 12 months since you retired and you still want to get a designation, you can. All right, so for the Chief Training Officer, there's two ways to go through this process. One is the Category B, which you need 150 points. And that is broken down into education, experience, size of your department, length of service, and where you are in the organization, your level. So all those points added together need to be 150 points. And then you can apply for the designation. The other is Category A. And Category A is a specific set of areas where if you meet them, say for instance, you are in training with a bachelor's degree and you have Fire Officer 3 and 4 or Fire Instructor 3 and 4, then you can put in for it under Category A and you don't have to write to the technical competencies. And I'll get into what the technical competencies are if you don't know what they are. So, and here's a list of what they are for the Chief Training Officer. The first 10 technical competencies in here are exactly the same for the Chief Fire Officer, Fire Marshal, Chief Training Officer, and Chief EMS Officer. So if you wanted to and you had to go through a credential and you wanted to get, say, CFO and CTO, do one of them first. And then when you apply for the second one, you only have to do the ones that are specific to the designation itself. You don't have to do the first 10 over again. So that way you're not doing the redundancy. And then your designation or your credential as the training officer through your organization meets a lot of the technical competencies in these from 11 through 17, and even meets some of them in the first 10. So those where that crosswalk will work is I can get with the organization and figure out which ones are crosswalks and create a process to where if it meets the intent of these technical competencies, we can make a crosswalk where you don't have to write to those because you've already met them in your credential through ISFSI. So going forward. So we'll have, that'll be a later conversation, but I think that'll be a good thing to get into and be able to whittle down some of the redundancy so you don't have to do it over again. Some of the basics of the application, you got personal information, employment, department, your letters of reference. A variety is better. You can come from the same organization and that's totally fine. It doesn't have to be from different places, but the more diverse you are, the better it looks in your application. You're not going to get knocked out because they came from the same organization. Just make sure they're all written differently. We've had people do the same letter with different names at the bottom, and that's not going to work. So just make sure you do that. There doesn't have to be a date on it. There used to be a date of, it couldn't be older than 6 months, but letters of reference were easier to do, and people would get those first. And so by the time they submit it, it'd be older than 6 months. And if you have them get them redone, all they're going to do is change the date and have them re-sign it again. So we took the date off of it. It doesn't have to have a date as long as it's signed. And in the professional development section, it's education, it's unofficial transcripts or the actual degree itself. Certifications, you have to upload your certificates. that are listed in the application. You don't have to upload any more. Training and courses, there's no copies needed. You just need to list them when you had the class, what the name of the class is, and what the organization was that did the class. And then developmental goals, these are based off the life safety initiatives specific to the designation. And I'll get to those here in just a second. Here they are. So in this one here, if you're going for the CTO and you click on the link that Brian will probably, or whoever puts in the chat, if you click on lifesafetyinitiatives.com, it'll bring up the 16 life safety initiatives, and each one of the designations has between 2 and 3 that are specific to the designation, and you have to write to those goals. And these goals are written as what you will do as an individual to try to enhance or better your department or yourself in these for these initiatives. It's not about your department. The designation is individual, so it's about you yourself. So look at it in that aspect. This is the area that has to be rewritten the most often, and it has to be written in first person. So it's you, it's I, me. It's not they or them. So just kind of look at it in that aspect. The other 2 or 3 are specific to the PIO, because the life safety initiatives didn't really speak to the PIO specifically. So there's some other links here. So if somebody wants to do the PIO, they can go to these links and it will help them write them a little bit easier. So any of the professional contributions or recognitions, you're going to list these. These are not, you don't have to upload any documents for this. So contributions and recognitions, these are contributions that you do to the fire service or to your organization, or any recognition that you've received are listed here. Memberships and affiliations are what they are, and memberships and affiliations to whatever organizations they are. They don't have to be specific to the fire service. The more you have, the better. And then community involvement. This is the hardest one for people in the fire service to actually have to write to or list. People in the fire service, we are the ones that don't like to pat ourselves on the back too much. And community involvement is one of those areas that people don't list a lot of, and usually is one of the things that a peer reviewer, when they look at your application, will say, you know, have you done this? And they'll say, it'll click in their head, oh yes, I have done that. You just have them add it to their application, and it just gives a more robust application when you do things in the community. All right, so getting started, this is, we just started this process. This is an online application now. We do not accept the paper application. So if anybody has downloaded it at some point and they have it on their computer, it's a good reference to use. You can type in it if you want, that's totally fine, and copy and paste. My suggestion would be is to actually go to this link and get in the system, download the application, and do everything in there. Especially when you have to write to the technical competencies or your developmental or designee goals, because in the application, the paper one, it didn't do spell check and it didn't do grammar check. In the cloud-based version, it does that. So if you misspell a word, it's going to underline it and show you that you misspelled it. If the grammar is not correct, it's going to give you suggestions on that. All right, so this new application, this is kind of what it looks like when you log in. You will, once you log in, you'll select a designation. You will click on it and select whichever one you want. You'll click on the eligibility requirements, and that'll be either category A or B. When you open up the application and you start it, you have to do the eligibility first. It'll come up with category A first. If you don't meet anything in category A, make sure you select none of the above, and then move down to category B. Once you're in category B, do all your points. As long as they meet 150 points, put your total at the bottom and submit it. It takes it a few minutes for the online program to process the rules. So give it, 15 or 20 minutes to kind of run through that. Once that happens, you go back into your application, and then your components will be there. And you go in and start uploading, for instance, your resume. You'll upload your documents wherever it says upload and submit it, and it's done. You will sign the certification statement at the very end, which basically says you're going to abide by the ethical rules and regulations, which are the very first of the paper application. It's about 4 pages long. And it's in here as well. You can read them if you wanted to when you went through them. So it's basically being ethical and all that. And then the very last thing you have to do is pay the fee. And we used to have it up where people could pay anytime. But people would pay first sometimes, and then they wouldn't submit their application for 6 or 8 months. It made it difficult for us to actually try to track that down. So we made it the last item on here. So once you're approved, I actually go through the process and make sure it's valid. It goes through the commission. The commission actually meets, well, they don't really meet. They get an e-ballot every single month of, say, for instance, June, for this month here. All the applications that are approved by the peer reviewer will go to the commission on July 5th, and they have 10 days to go through the list, which is usually quite a bit because they do the new and renewal applications, and they approve those. Once that's done, your application is approved, your profile is updated in the system. You get an email through the system that congratulates you on the process. In there's a digital badge that you can upload to your LinkedIn account that actually shows when you're designated and when it expires. It gives a description on what the designation is. And you can also download your certificate as well. It's a PDF version. We've gotten away from mailing the certificates because it's exactly the same thing as if we mailed it. It's the same thing that you would download. Then you can put it on whatever paper that you like. When we send it, it's just on a piece of paper. Most of the time, it's not on cardstock. But if you want it on cardstock, you could do that yourself. On the renewals, this is done every 3 years. You will get a notification 6 months ahead on when your designation is due. So you shouldn't miss it once it goes through, because you'll get like 45 days later, you'll get another email. Up to the last month, you'll get an email that is due. So some of the things that we actually changed in the renewal application, if you were designated before and you went through the renewal process, we added a couple things in here. When we started out changing the renewal process, it was, then I'll back up just a little bit. In June of 22, there were 3 new technical competencies added to the new application, which was these 3 here that you see, these 3 areas. So people had to write to these. If anybody went through category A at all, they didn't see these technical competencies. When I went through it, I had to do category B. Years ago, these were not included in any of my applications way back when I did them. So when you go through the renewal process now, it doesn't say you have to write to any of this. It just says, what class did you take? CPSE's added on the university 3 videos, and each one of them speaks to these 3 areas. You can use that as your continuing education for those 3 areas, and that's all you have to do. The second thing we did was the designee goals. This was a big thing. We asked we sent out over 3,000 emails to designees and asked them about this. Would it be beneficial to identify what you had achieved in those designee goals that you identified 3 years ago? And I believe it was close to 90% said definitely. Well, for myself and others that were like, I was designated as a CFO back in 2007. I couldn't tell you what was on my application for my designee goals. So what we decided to do was, since we pushed it out this year, we said anyone that was designated after January of 2021 is to go back and look at your designee goals, because most people had their application 3 years ago, and just say if you achieved them or not. It's not a pass or fail. If you didn't meet them, that's fine, because people's jobs change, life happens, just things like that. So, and put that in there. This is what happened. I was able to do this one, but not these. And if you wanted to, and you could achieve them, you can put them as your designee goals, because we ask you to put 3 more for the next 3 years. Just list them. It's just write a little, I want to do this, this, and this. If it's one of the above, that's fine as well. So I've already went through this. Auto reminders, e-ballots every month. That's for new ones as well. So we used to have to wait, or designees would have to wait close to 4 months to even know if they were designated or not, because the commission only met every 3 months. So this made it a lot more timely. If you got your application in this month, it's going to get to the commission the next month. So the longest you have to wait is 30 days, 45 days max, depending on when you got your application in. And our system is live now. It went live back in February, but now it's exclusive to cloud generation. So there's some neat things we did with this program. Is if you were ever on our old website and you went and tried to look up a designee, or if your designation was in there, you went to the site and you had to click on CFO designees, and you had to run through the list or type the name in. This one here, if you go to our website under credentialing and go to the directory, this is a live update. So if we update it in cloud generation, it automatically updates here. This is what it looks like. You type in either the designation, the last name, the department or company name, city, state. So if you want to know who's designated in your state, you can look that up, or the city, any way you want to look at it. So this one here is basically looking up the last name. And I didn't do this, somebody else did it, but it's Jim White, actually, the one they pulled it up, the CFAI program manager for accreditation. And this shows all the people who are with the last name of White, or White in the name itself. So you can get specific or general as you want. This was done by North Carolina, so you put the 3-digit or 2-digit or 2 letters in there, and you can pull up everyone from North Carolina or Iowa or Georgia, whichever one, Virginia, whichever one you want to find. You can go here and look who's designated. If you hover over the actual shield, it will show when they expire or their designations. You can click on it, it'll open up their designation as well. So there's just some helpful information that, since if you were ever in the old website that we had, and when we had the Word fillable form, there were some PDF documents that kind of said, this is what you put here, this is what you put here in the application. This is a little bit different. These videos that are on here, the first 3, have been redone, and they are up to date as of now, as of the new processes and how to write to the designee goals, the technical competencies, and then the introduction to credentialing itself. The next section, which is the actual online application videos, there are 5 of those. They are not long. I think the longest one may be about 4.5 minutes long. They're between 2.5 to 4.5 minutes long total. So it's not like you got to sit there and listen to something for 30 minutes. The ones above that are longer because they do get into a little more detail. These are basically how to get in, how to write to them, what to click on, how to do different aspects. There's also an instruction guide when you go to the university for the credentialing, and it tells you exactly what to do. So this is the actual site that you go to for the credentialing and all those things I just listed. So really, just to conclude on this, The credentialing gives you professional recognition. Sometimes it helps with moving up in an organization or going for another job somewhere. A lot of times what happens is if you look at applications or people who are looking for individuals to come to an organization, they list the CPSE or CPC designations as a recommended designation to have. So it can advance you along in your career. It's a personal goal. It's a roadmap for you to look for to make yourself better as you move along in an organization, or to make yourself better. When you're doing the application, you'll find areas that you're lacking, and that's where you can make yourself more robust going forward as an individual. And I'll leave that as for some questions. And this is my information. If you scan this QR code, I'll leave it up here for a few minutes. It's got my email, all my information. It's got my cell phone number on it. So if you want to give me a call, you have questions about something, by all means, just give me a call.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mike. It's awesome to have had you on here. You truly are the subject matter expert when it comes to this credentialing program, and so that's some great info as far as how CPSE works and some of the intricacies to the application. So with the second half of this, what I'd like to do, I'm kind of a nuts and bolts guy, right? And a lot of folks tune into these happy hours to kind of have some takeaways. What's my next step as soon as this happy hour is over, to move forward with the designation process. And that's what I'd like to talk about. I'm going to kick it to Jesse here in just a second to talk a little bit about some of the elements of the training officer credential program and how that can fit in. But just if you're tuning in and you're not familiar, I'm going to focus in specifically on that chief training officer credential, because obviously this is the ISFSI. We have a lot of, the best of the best instructors in the United States are in this organization, and it makes a tremendous amount of sense for a lot of them to also hold that chief training officer credential. I think maybe there's what, Mike, a couple hundred or something like that CTOs. And so we want to increase that number, right? It's a great thing to have, and to really, just as Mike said a little bit ago, it's a roadmap. If I've told people this 1,000 times, don't wait until you think you're ready to go into that system, to go into either formerly known as downloading the application to read it, or now creating a login to that cloud generation site and starting to look through those technical competencies. But in either case, do it now, because that then becomes a map for you to follow. Oh, here's something I'm a little weak in this technical competency. Maybe I should take this class. I don't really have much experience in this. Maybe I should try to hitch my wagon to this particular project that's going on in our fire department or something like that. And so use that as a map, not just kind of the destination. A couple of nuts and bolts things that popped in my head, and I just brought up my own CTO application from a couple of years ago, or from a few years ago, I should say, and was looking at where I plugged certain ISFSI classes in. So ISFSI offers the training officer credential program, which I'll kick to Jesse here in just a second as one of the subject matter experts on that program. And we also offer the 1403 live fire instructor credential. And I actually used both of those specifically in my chief training officer application. I just looked back through my original application. I mentioned the chief training officer credential and the projects associated with that program in 3 different technical competencies. I use that, and I also use the 1403 live fire instructor in one of the technical competencies. So there are some major projects as part of TOC that are, that is not, certainly you're not ready to go with CTO just by completing the ISFSI training officer credential, but that is a perfect primer to get you pointed in that direction. And another thing before I kick it over to Jesse here is National Fire Academy. I was looking back through my application as well. Perfect stuff for the education section of a lot of those technical competencies is NFA classes. I've got it pulled up in my other screen over here right now, of the different courses on the NFA course catalog. The big one, kind of the foundational one, at least in my opinion, is that training program management course. The 6-day TPM course over at NFA is a great kind of foundational bedrock course for training officers, so that's a good one to get in. There's integrating technology into fire and EMS training. That's a I think what used to be known as 21st Century Fire and EMS Training Officer, at least that's what it was when I went through it. There's training program design, training operations in small departments. So get onto the National Fire Academy website and look at that training program series. I plugged in several NFA courses into technical competencies as well. So just wanted to kind of set that conversation up a little bit. So Jesse, I want to kick it over to you. You're familiar with CTO and some of the technical competencies and very familiar with the ISFSI training officer credential. So how do some of the projects maybe fit into that? Just as one example, you know, one of the TOC projects is a purchasing thing, you know, where you're buying something and having to learn your city's purchasing processes and things like that if you didn't know that previously. And that fit in perfectly to one of the financial practices technical competencies in the CTO app. So what are some examples of what that crosswalk between TOC and CTO looks like?
Absolutely. And I think for everyone, myself included, it can be intimidating a little bit when we're looking at getting into something like this professional designation. What does that roadmap look like? And the ISFSI Training Officer Credential Program is a great springboard into the CPSE Chief Training Officer credential. And a lot of the projects that you just alluded to really do fit seamlessly with it. And the neat thing about the Training Officer Credential Program through ISFSI is it's really an online community or an online cohort of several people going through the process at the same time. So it's student driven in terms of getting the assignments completed and working to an overall objective, similar to what we would be doing through the professional designations, but there's also guided instruction along the way. So it's a process, and I think sometimes people think of professional development as a finish line or credentialing as a finish line versus another part of that process. And you know, the training officer credential program starts off pretty basic, review of several different documents and reference materials, and then gets in the NFPA, and we start talking about professional standards and consensus standards and why those matter and how you can apply them on the local level in your organization. We talk about strategic program management. We talk about a budgeting exercise, as you alluded to. There are a handful of projects in addition to an online forum or chat board that really allows you to do some neat networking and see how things are done, not just in your organization, but in other organizations as well. And I feel like at the end of that process, the end of that couple months, those candidates who successfully complete that are primed for the process with CPSE and the Commission on Professional Credentialing. I think that those two items can flow really well together.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one of the other things is that sometimes people struggle with, and Mike mentioned people struggling sometimes with community involvement, and I definitely agree. Sometimes some of the applications I've reviewed, the professional contributions is sometimes something that they struggle with a little bit. And that, again, ISFSI is a perfect conduit for some of those professional contribution pieces, right? I would be willing to bet that they would be willing to take an article for the Academy newsletter for, you know, from anybody on this call, you know, and submit, you know, they're always, Emily, are you the one that gathers up some of the content for the Academy newsletter? And so again, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, so is it fair to say you're always looking for more authors and content?
Absolutely.
Right, so that's an easy way to get started into writing stuff, and that goes perfect into professional contributions and recognition in that portion of that CTO application. And then right below it in the CTO application, or in the next stage, if you're doing it on the Cloud Generation website, as you will be now, is professional memberships and affiliations. And ISFSI can certainly be at the top of that list, particularly if you're applying for the Chief Training Officer credential. So there are so many avenues within ISFSI, in particular, that Training Officer credential and the 1403 Live Fire Instructor credential, that really are just prime material for the education sections of several of those technical competencies in CTO, and which can then be rounded out with college level courses. If you have completed your associate's or bachelor's or master's degree and you are applying under category B, if you're in category A, obviously you're not doing those technical competencies. But if you are applying in category B and you've completed a lot of college coursework, a lot of those classes go in there really well, you know, in addition to those National Fire Academy courses. So there's so much ISFSI stuff that really goes in there. So I want to pause here for a little bit and kind of kick it to the group. And there's plenty more stuff that we can talk about. But if you've got some specific questions about this, we've got Jesse that really is a subject matter expert on training officer credential and several knowledgeable ISFSI folks. And we got Mike here from CPSE. So what are some specifics? Feel free to unmute and bring your cameras off of mute and ask some questions and talk through it. Is anybody thinking about doing CTO right now? Don't everybody jump at once. Take your time, take a turn. All right, well, regardless, I hope that you are, because if anybody on this call is not, all right, Christopher Jack replied, yes. Well, I appreciate that. Anybody that's on this call, if you're engaged in the ISFSI, if you're interested enough to have tuned in today to this hump day, to this happy hour, then you're primed and ready to start looking at this. Even if you don't have all of the boxes checked and everything ready to go, if you're interested enough to even be listening to us for the last 41 minutes, you need to establish an account on that cloud generation site and start looking through that CTO, and also be looking heavily at the training officer credential. What are the ins and outs on that? Is there one of those coming up, Lee or Emily or Jesse?
Yeah, Jesse's in the midst of a class right now, so it's going on, and then there'll be another one that's starting, I believe, in the late summer, and then again late fall. So Jesse, we have 2 instructors on that program, Norm Bemis out of Illinois, and then Jesse out of Michigan, and they alternate those classes as an instructor. You know, what we're finding is, and Mike, maybe you can help with this, is that when somebody starts digging into some of these courses that are kind of collegiate level, even though we try to make them more creative in the delivery model, we still find that the course load is overwhelming. And I guess it's because the adult learner who's juggling a full-time job and a family and a social life, and they start digging into what it looks like to invest in their own professional development, finds that overwhelming. And so, you know, maybe one of the things that we should do as an organization, and Mike, if you guys have tackled this in any way, shape, or form, we'd love to learn from you, is like, especially the people that are on the call right now. I mean, they're doing it all, right? Like, they're working, they're on this call, they're getting text messages and phone calls from the chief. They're, you know, the wife's texting, asking them to stop at the grocery store on the way home and grab dinner or diapers or whatever the case may be. How are you helping that adult individual who's learning to invest in their own professional development prioritize that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've had it come up a lot. It's good because the application is, like you said, it is overwhelming. There's a lot of information you have to put in there. When we tell folks, okay, so in the morning when you go to work and you're there 15, 20 minutes early or whatever the case may be, pull up the application, type out something. You can type out a designee goal in 5 minutes probably. And if you do that each day during the day when you have your break, whatever the case may be, just go into it, do it. And by the time, within a month, you can have a category B with technical competencies written out in a month. It just depends on the individual's drive and what they have going on. We have people we had one this morning, a guy said he would have his CFO application completed today or tomorrow, which he had just gotten in it today. So it just depends on the individual, on the time they have. But most people who have a job, have a social life, have everything else going on, they do have that time during the day, which is a downtime, is just to sit there and plug out one section. If you do the personal information and demographics, that's a no-brainer. You can get that done in no time. The ones that you have to spend a little more time on, just knock out a paragraph in one of those technical competencies. And we don't ask you to write a dissertation, a paragraph that basically says, this is what I'm doing for this technical competency or this designated goal. A paragraph is plenty. It doesn't have to be 2 or 3 paragraphs, as long as it's succinct and to the point.
Yeah, we're kind of preaching to the choir, with this group of individuals. I mean, as I'm looking at the names on this, I mean, these are the members who hold the ISFSI live fire fixed facility credential designation or required structure or both, as well as TOC, have been a part of almost every class we've ever taught, or showing up to committee meetings, and are really taking advantage of all that their $135 a year means to them in terms of being a member of the organization. You were talking a lot about the writing components of it, and I see Mary's face on here, and so I'm going to pick on her just for a second because she's brave enough to show her face and participate. But one of the things the training officer credential designation is, it does there is a good deal of writing that has to take place, and it's amazing how unprepared that a lot of the fire service is for higher education writing styles. And Mary's been great to work with us in the past to offer seminars and trainings to the members on that. So Mary, is there any advice that you'd like to give the attendees on the call today regarding, crafting their writing skills?
No, I would just reinforce what I don't know if it was you or Emily said earlier, but oh no, it was somebody else, that as if this is a skill set that is weak, or that you're just not sure if it's good enough, and put it in the list of skill sets that you are working on a year or two in advance to strengthen. These are trainable skills. Writing is a trainable skill, like learning to operate a pump panel. But a lot of people feel like they're either born with weak skills or not, and that's not true. So I think that if people, just start doing their own self-training or take a class here and there and just incrementally keep making improvements. One of the bigger issues sometimes is just self-confidence, to feel like that this is good enough. People often just aren't sure. So yes, just put it on the list of tasks or skill sets that you're developing before you begin the process.
And one of those things that, and sorry, Brad and Jesse, I'm not trying to steal the show here, but having you guys here on this happy hour, I mean, please use the chat feature and share one thing that you would like to see ISFSI do to assist you with your professional development. Is it a webinar on X, Y, and Z? Is it the development of a course that trains on ABC? You guys drive the conversation, and if you're not sharing with us what you need to be a stronger, more efficient instructor and to develop, I mean, our sandbox at ISFSI is developing you as an instructor, period. That's what we do. That is what drives us. So please take 2 seconds and go, I really wish there was more information to help me craft the art of blah, 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 blah. Put it in that chat feature and let us work to develop that for you. It's what we do.
I can add a little bit to that. What we found is people who have difficulty with writing or whatever the case may be, we have 265 peer reviewers. And of those, at times we do ask them, do you want to be a mentor for this individual to help them through the process, help them write these different areas? And 99% of them, maybe even 100% are like, thank you. And the mentor just walks them through each area, how to write this, how to put it in the right order, the right context, so that it helps them a little bit. It makes it a little easier for them, and they're not overwhelmed in the process. It may take them a little bit longer to do it, but at least they have someone that they can fall back on.
Sorry, I'm in the midst of dropping a bunch of links in the chat over there. Please check those out. In addition to the ones that Brian dropped in there earlier related to the CPSE credentialing process, I just dropped in links to the credentialing programs overview for ISFSI, as well as online Con Ed resources and stuff like that. If you just look through those, there's a ton of good stuff that would go very good into several of the technical competencies in CTO. And I also dropped in a link from the National Fire Academy with the training programs brought up there as well. The stuff is out there. You just got to start leaning into it and start doing these things for your professional development. Lean on that ISFSI membership, just like Lee talked about earlier. There's so many options out there and so much bang for your buck in that membership. And the other thing that I want to say just real briefly is, this gets said a lot, and it's absolutely true. The application is extensive for CTO. It is comprehensive and so on and so forth. But just like Mike said earlier, I want to make sure that that's not lost on anybody. We're talking about a paragraph. We're talking about a paragraph for each technical competency. It is not a novel by any stretch. And sometimes I think people almost get a little freaked out just hearing other people talk about it, and then they're just like, oh, I don't have time to even attempt this. If you eat that elephant one bite at a time, just like Mike said, you can go in 15, 20 minutes, if that, and write a paragraph for your technical competency. I was just looking through my old CTO application, and I literally, have a paragraph or 2 paragraphs for everything, just summarizing things that I was involved in that particular technical competency. It's not as intimidating as it sounds. And so if anybody's listening into this thinking, oh geez, no way I've got time for this, you do have time for it, and you just got to write a little bit at a time. It's really not as boogeyman extensive as occasionally it's made out to be. There's a lot of technical competencies, but for each one you're only writing a paragraph. So I know I sound like a cheerleader, but I am for all of this stuff. Brian, are you back with us, brother?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I had to step away real quick, but yeah, I've been listening for the last 15 so minutes or so, and from what everyone said, and obviously holding a couple of credentials myself, and being a part of a former department that was credentialed, I'm an advocate for this. It's a huge part of your professional development. If you look at it from the standpoint of, it's really making sure that you maintain and have accomplished everything within those JPRs of that NFPA standard. And that's what you're doing, is you're comparing yourself to that standard and making sure that you're as well-rounded as you can be for yourself and for your organization. So, I remember going through the CTO and the CFO applications, and like you guys say, it's eating that little bite at a time. I would just take 1 week, and that would be that week's technical competency, and write to it, and the next week technical competency and write to it, and just, it's not really a ton. It's just really just taking the time, 15 minutes at a time, and just saying, okay, I'm going to dedicate 15 minutes today to myself, write out my technical competency. Next week, I'm going to do another one. Don't think like, hey, this roadmap for success is, well, I got a little extra time today, so I'm going to get 2 in today. No, just stay to what your plan is. And once you have that plan laid out, you'll find success in actually executing it. So, but I think it's been great, a great hour of time. We've got a lot of people on this call, this happy hour today, talking about professional development, what opportunities exist outside from the CPSE in terms of the Chief Training Officer credential, and the misnomer that you have to be a chief to hold this credential. That we've squashed that today, which is fantastic, along with the several other credentials that they offer. So, make sure that, as training officers for organizations, you guys are advocating to yourself to be CTOs, but also look at your other organizations and challenge the other members, that your fire marshal, their medical officer, your company officers, that, challenge their professional development as well, and compare themselves with the other opportunities that exist within the CPSE. And, big thanks to Mike today for taking time out of your day to join us, and to all the members that got on here today. Put your questions in the chat if you got any more. Otherwise, we'll wrap this thing up, and appreciate everyone's time. And, like Lee said, we're here for you. We're a membership driven organization, and we're only as strong as our members. And if we don't know what you guys need, I've told you guys that before when we had our meeting in April at FDIC. That's why we exist. That's why the board's here. That's why the executive board's here. That's why Lee's here, is for the members. And so if you need anything, there's Emily putting it out there, membership at ISFSI, send it to us. Send us your thoughts, send us your comments, send us what we can do to help. Say, what can we improve on? We strive to always be constantly changing so that we're evolving, so we're meeting the needs of the members. So again, everybody, thanks for everybody's time. I think we got a lot of good information, and we'll wrap it up.